a huge collision. She posted a video of what her face currently looks like, and as you guys can see here, she has two black eyes. Two black eyes, her under eyes are swollen, her nose is swollen, the bridge between her eyebrows is swollen. So her and Gabby Williams collided on a play, and I'll show it to you guys right here. Skylar Diggins is driving to the basket, and as you can see, Lexi Hull comes over to play help side defense, but then she sees that the ball gets loose and she starts going for it. Now, Gabby Williams was also going full speed to try to get this loose ball, and they collided. Obviously, with both of them, neither of them were trying to injure the other player. They were both just going for the ball, obviously didn't see one another, was blindsided. But this was a huge collision, and you can see the way that Lexi reacts, how bad it actually hurt.
Let's talk about the Fever actually blowing a team off the map tonight.
When two players smash heads so hard, the entire arena goes silent. Most assume the night is over. But not for Lexi Hull. She walked back onto the court minutes later with a swelling knot on her forehead and instantly dove for a rebound. And that single act told you everything about the Indiana Fever's identity. In this video, you'll see exactly how a short-handed Fever squad, without Caitlin Clark and without half their guards, turned what should have been a lost night into their most complete performance of the season. You'll discover how Aaliyah Boston dominated inside, how Odyssey Sims and Kelsey Mitchell rose to the occasion, and what Boston revealed afterward that has the entire locker room fired up. We'll break it down step by step, from the injuries that piled up before tip-off, to the shocking collision that flipped the entire game, to the dominant statement win that reshaped the playoff race. And just wait until you hear the update about Caitlin Clark's return, because here's the truth. Most fans were frustrated, even nervous. Clark's Nike logo night was supposed to be a celebration, but instead she was sidelined in street clothes while the Fever limped into another must-win. Everyone was asking the same question. Without their superstar, could this team survive? What happened next shocked everybody. The Indiana Fever's challenges started well before the opening tip, and for a while, it felt like the season itself was unraveling. Caitlin Clark was still sidelined with a groin injury that had already kept her out for weeks, leaving the Fever without their floor general and most dangerous scorer. But she wasn't alone on the injury list. Sophie Cunningham, Ari McDonald, and Sydney Colson were all done for the season, each loss stripping away more of Indiana's already thin guard rotation. Even Chloe Bibby, who had been fighting through knee discomfort, was limited. That meant the bench was paper thin, forcing the starters to log heavy minutes on a night where mistakes could cost them everything. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Fever had dropped 4 of their last 5 games, slipping dangerously close to the edge of the playoff picture, with a 19-18 record, clinging to the 8th and final postseason spot. And standing directly across from them was Seattle, holding 6th place in the standings, just 1 win ahead. This wasn't just another regular season game. Every possession mattered, not only to avoid sliding further down the standings, but also to prove this team had the toughness to fight through adversity. For players and fans alike, the urgency was impossible to ignore. The Fever walked into Gainbridge Fieldhouse with their backs against the wall, carrying the weight of expectations, injuries, and frustration. But as heavy as it all felt, the night was only just beginning to reveal how much tougher the battle would become. The atmosphere inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse was electric before the ball was even tossed. It was supposed to be a showcase of Clark's rising stardom, proof of how far she had already come as both a player and a cultural icon. But the spotlight felt oddly incomplete, because Clark herself wasn't in uniform. Instead, she sat courtside in warm-ups, sidelined by the same groin injury that had already stretched into one of the longest absences of her career. Fans cheered her presence, but at the same time, the question hung over the arena. If this night was supposed to belong to Clark, who would carry the Fever on the floor? Without her playmaking, her outside shooting, and her gravity as a defender magnet, Indiana's offense looked vulnerable. The backcourt was already gutted by injuries, and now the team had to rely on inside scoring, rebounding, and hustle just to stand a chance. Across from them, Seattle arrived with veteran stability, plenty of firepower, and their own playoff urgency. To most people in the building, the equation was simple. This was going to be a grind, and the Fever would be lucky just to keep it close. Yet as the lights dimmed and the crowd settled in, what no one realized was that the story of the night wasn't going to be about branding or even superstardom. It was about toughness, grit, and the kind of resilience that no marketing campaign could ever capture. It happened fast, but the sound alone was enough to make the arena freeze. Early in the first quarter, Lexi Hull and Gabby Williams both dove for a loose ball under the basket, colliding head-to-head with such force that it echoed through Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Both players hit the floor and stayed down, leaving fans stunned and commentators silent. Williams eventually made her way to the bench, but Hull immediately clutched her forehead and walked straight to the locker room. Cameras caught the swelling almost instantly, a knot forming above her eye so visible that fans winced just looking at it. The energy inside the arena shifted from excitement to dread. The Fever were already shorthanded, missing nearly their entire guard rotation, and Hull wasn't just another body on the roster. She was the glue player who defended the opponent's toughest guards, crashed the boards, and made every hustle play that doesn't always show in the box score but decides games. Losing her on top of everything else felt like the breaking point, the kind of blow that could turn the night into a disaster before it even started. On social media, fans were already calling her night finished, convinced there was no way she would return after an impact like that. The sight of Hull leaving with a swelling knot was the very image of Indiana's bad luck, a season defined by injuries getting worse at the worst possible moment. It looked like the dam had finally broken. But just when it seemed like the Fever couldn't take another hit, the entire narrative of the night was about to flip. Just when it looked like the Fever had suffered the final blow, Lexi Hull stunned everyone by reappearing from the locker room and checking back into the game. The swelling on her forehead was still visible, the kind of knot that makes most players call it a night. Yet Hull didn't jog back onto the court to ease in. Her very first play was a full-speed dive for a loose ball. The crowd erupted, rising to its feet as if the act of toughness itself had lit a fuse in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Fans had assumed her night was done, but instead she was making the kind of statement that words can't capture. Hull isn't known for flashy scoring, but on a roster gutted by injuries, her energy is irreplaceable. She defends top guards, fights for rebounds, and throws her body into plays most wouldn't risk, and that's exactly what she brought the moment she returned. The numbers told the story too. 9 rebounds, countless hustle possessions, and a team best plus-minus of plus 31, proving her impact wasn't just symbolic, it changed the game. Afterward, Aaliyah Boston called Hull the definition of tough, and head coach Stephanie White went even further, saying she never lets pain show and simply battles every possession. That mindset spread through the Fever immediately. The bench fed off it, the starters tightened up their defense, and suddenly the narrative shifted from surviving without Clark to showing grit that no opponent could ignore. What looked like a devastating injury became the exact spark that defined the night, and it set the stage for Boston to dominate the paint like never before. With Hull setting the tone, it was Aaliyah Boston who turned the momentum into domination, and Seattle had no answer for her presence inside. From the opening minutes, Boston carved out deep position in the paint, using her size and strength to seal defenders and force mismatches that looked unfair. Every possession seemed to end the same way, Boston bullying her way to the rim, finishing through contact, or drawing doubles that left her teammates wide open. By halftime, she was already controlling both ends of the floor, scoring with efficiency while anchoring the Fever's defense against a Storm team that relies heavily on rhythm. The rebounding numbers told the story better than anything. Indiana pulled down 42 boards to Seattle's 21. A staggering margin that almost never happens at this level, and Boston was at the center of it. She finished with 27 points and 9 rebounds, but her impact went far beyond the box score. Every time Seattle tried to drive, she was there to contest. Every time they tried to collapse on her, she found the right outlet. She dictated the pace of the game simply by being unmovable in the paint. Her teammates and coaches later said that her aggressiveness set the tone for the entire night, proving that when she decides to play downhill, no one can stop her. For a Fever team that had struggled with identity all season, Boston's dominance provided clarity. If she controlled the inside, everything else could fall into place. And on this night, she looked like the kind of star who could carry a team deep into the postseason. While Boston owned the paint, Indiana needed perimeter firepower to keep Seattle honest, and that's where Odyssey Sims and Kelsey Mitchell turned the game into a showcase. Sims, signed midseason, played like she had been with the team for years, attacking off the dribble, pushing tempo in transition, and delivering the kind of fearless plays that shift momentum. Her 22 points weren't just numbers on a stat sheet, they came with swagger, capped by a deep three from the logo that sent the crowd into chaos. That shot wasn't just 3 points. It was a statement that Indiana wasn't intimidated by anyone, no matter how short-handed they were. Mitchell matched that energy with her trademark consistency, pouring in 21 points and hitting big shots whenever Seattle tried to close the gap. Without Clark's floor spacing, Mitchell became the steady perimeter threat, who forced the defense to respect the outside while Boston pounded them inside. Together, the trio of Boston, Sims, and Mitchell gave Indiana a balanced attack that felt unstoppable, each feeding off the other's confidence. The Storm's defense had no good answers. Collapse on Boston and Sims or Mitchell burned them. Stay home on the guards, and Boston destroyed them down low. What stood out most was how seamlessly they complemented each other, turning what could have been a desperate patchwork lineup into a group that looked polished and dangerous. For a team written off before tip-off, their combined effort transformed a survival fight into a dominant performance. By the time the final buzzer sounded, it didn't feel like Indiana had survived, it felt like they had imposed their will. The Fever didn't just edge past Seattle, they dismantled them 95-75, completing a 3-0 season sweep that no one outside their locker room expected. What made the win even more striking was how it unfolded. This wasn't a fluky night of hot shooting or an opponent collapsing, it was Indiana dictating every element of the game. They dominated the boards, they controlled the paint, and they played with a physical edge that forced the Storm to react instead of create. The defense was relentless, holding Seattle to just 3 fast break points while turning stops into quick strike offense of their own. Coaches called it the best team effort they'd seen in weeks, pointing to the 22 assists on 36 made field goals as proof that this wasn't about one hero, it was about everyone buying in. For the fans who had come expecting a sideshow without Clark, they instead witnessed a statement that the Fever season wasn't hanging by a thread, it was surging with new life. And as players celebrated on the court, the underlying truth became clear. This wasn't just a win in the standings, it was a shift in identity. Indiana had shown grit, toughness, and balance, and the entire league now had to pay attention. As Indiana celebrated their most complete win in weeks, the sight every fan had been waiting for finally appeared. Caitlin Clark back on the practice court. For the first time since suffering her groin injury in mid-July, Clark joined live workouts with her teammates, signaling that her long recovery might finally be nearing its end. Coach Stephanie White confirmed she had moved from solo drills and light contact to full practice reps, stressing that the next hurdle would be handling sustained pressure and contact without setbacks. No exact return date was locked in, but all signs pointed toward a possible comeback on the upcoming West Coast trip, with the Los Angeles Sparks circled as the target. For a Fever team clinging to playoff position, the timing couldn't be more critical. They've already proven they can win without her, but adding Clark's shooting, playmaking, and gravitational pull on defenses could elevate them from a scrappy underdog into a legitimate postseason threat. Now, the question writes itself. If the Fever can dominate shorthanded, what happens when their biggest star returns? With only a handful of games left, her comeback could turn this playoff race upside down. The Fever's win over Seattle wasn't just about standings or stats, it was about rewriting their identity. Lexi Hull's toughness became the spark, Aaliyah Boston's dominance set the tone, and the fearless play of Odyssey Sims and Kelsey Mitchell carried the momentum until the final horn. Together, they turned what could have been a desperate scramble into a statement that echoed across the league. And now, with Clark's return looming closer by the day, the question every fan is asking feels bigger than ever. If this team can impose their will while shorthanded, what ceiling do they reach when they're whole again? Could the Fever transform from playoff hopefuls into true contenders in just a matter of weeks? That's the story worth watching. Because if one thing's clear, it's that the Fever story is far from finished, and the best chapters might be just about to begin.